My name is Justin, and I am a son of God and an addict, and the host of the RICO 12 speaker meeting. And thanks to my God, the steps, and the fellowship of other addicts, I'm sober one day at a time since June 19th, 2015. And for that, I am beyond grateful. Welcome to RICO 12. We are an organization whose addictions include alcohol, drugs, lust, and sex, food, and gambling, just to name a few. We come together from all places, faiths, and backgrounds to learn the similarities of addiction and to gain tools and hope from others who are walking a similar path. We invite recovering addicts with at least 1 year sobriety and who are actively working their recovery in their respective fellowships to share their experience, strength, and hope on a live Zoom webinar each Friday, typically at noon Central Time. Today, we're doing it a little bit different for various reasons, but that they share for 20 to 25 minutes. Then we, the live audience, get the opportunity to ask questions of the speaker for another 20 to 25 minutes. If you're hearing this meeting in the recorded podcast form and would like to participate as a live audience member in the future, please go to RICO12.com. That's RECO12.com to learn more and to submit your email address there to receive weekly invitations. RICO 12 is a self-supporting service, and we appreciate your help in keeping us working our Step 12 in this manner. We gratefully accept contributions to help cover the cost of the Zoom platform, podcast platform, web hosting, and administrative costs. To contribute, you can go to RICO12.com/support, or you can click on the link to PayPal that'll be in the chat of the live meeting and also in the show notes of the podcast. When you contribute, please specify the meeting number. This is number 74. One word about our speakers before we introduce today's speaker. When we line up a speaker for a meeting, we ask them to seek guidance on what and how to present so that they can reflect the light they have been given. That light will inspire hope, meaning, worth, and growth in us, the listening audience. Now, let's introduce our guest speaker for today, Pamela, whose topic is going deeper in challenging times. Now, here's a little bit about her. In her own words, she says, I came into AEA, that's Addictive Eaters Anonymous, and AA broken in 2008. My life wasn't working anymore. I felt like a big, fat, oversized, childish oaf. I love that. Today, totally dependent on other people's opinions of me. I was so relieved when my sponsor offered me a complete change of my life and thinking if only I was able to go to any length to get it. I said yes, and I found life gets better and better with this new way of life, despite outside circumstances. Pamela, the floor is yours. Take it away.
Thank you, Justin. Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here and to share my story. Yes, so Justin asked me to share maybe a month ago or so, and I simply sat still, and what came to me was the current climate that the world seems to be in at the moment, and I decided that I would choose, if you like, step 10, step 11, and step 12, which speak to me about continuing to get deeper and deeper into sobriety, into the program, into a conscious contact with a power greater than myself, and into helping other alcoholics, addicts, addictive eaters. And that bio was written maybe last week, maybe 2 weeks ago, and I was remembering how it was for me, not just in 2008, but as a child growing up. I believe I had this disease well before I picked up the first one of food, the first one of drink. I was a young, vulnerable girl. I did not know how the world operated. I felt alone. I felt too black, too tall, too Jamaican, too English. I felt stupid. And I really believe that. I had no other reference frame. You know, I went to Sunday school. The preacher talked about a jealous God, an angry God, and I couldn't relate to it. apart from the guilt and the shame, it went hand in hand with that message from the pastor of the church. And funnily enough, I know that God was with me because I didn't blame the pastor. I had some resentment towards my mother because she was a strong personality, and children were to be seen and not heard in my household. Somehow I survived. Somehow I did attract friends into my life. Somehow I did manage to speak well, read. I loved books. I loved Enid Blyton and all of those types of British school books. I love comics. I love fantasy. I love to fantasize. And I would often find myself in the pantry, in the larder, in my parents' home, my childhood home. And I would often find myself reaching for, I don't know if the US has a brown sauce, just like ketchup, but it's brown. Actually, it's made in Birmingham. It originates from Birmingham in the Midlands, where I come from. I would find myself putting lashings of brown sauce onto toast, stuffing down my feelings of inadequacy with brown toast and brown sauce. I would find myself taking my father's heart tablets from the top shelf. I was only 8 or 10, and then swallowing those heart tablets with the remnants of bottles of beer or sweet cherry or baby sham. And I felt good. It took away the pain. And that sweet nectar at the back of my throat made me gasp and say, that's better, that's better. And as some of us know, this is a disease of more. Whatever I am using outside the source, the spirit of the universe, whatever I am using to quell the disturbance grows into a monster. So I absolutely recognize and understand now how I could not win this race, because I needed more baby sham, more sherry. I needed more chocolate cake. I needed more bread and more ketchup on those slices of bread, and nothing worked. So I walked into the rooms 30 years ago. I actually came to people that I know in Addictive Eaters Anonymous and Alcoholics Anonymous. My very first meeting was April 1993. And Justin, it was amazing because I heard people talking about food and drink in the way that I was using food and drink. And I thought at that time that they were separate issues that needed separate solutions. I didn't quite grasp the fact that addiction swaps from one substance to the next. So these were my early days in the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous and in coming to contact with AEA members. And yet still, I saw in those members a stillness, a peace, and a joy that I knew I needed, but I was afraid of it. I really thought that it wasn't for me. Really? Could I really live a life where I knew how to talk, work, stand in line at the supermarket? Could I really cultivate a life where I was equal to my other girlfriends, where I could attract a boyfriend and a husband? Me? Really? And yet these people were telling me it was possible. So in my early membership in the fellowship, I would practice some of the program, but not all of it. I would come to some meetings. I would use it as a self-help group. That's a good way of describing my first 15 years in the fellowship. I did not understand this was an illness. It swapped from substance to substance. And if I am not vigilant, if I do not practice these principles in all my affairs and get a really good grasp of step one, I didn't stand a chance. And suffice to say that the disease in me, that was the restlessness, the irritability, the fear, the resentments, they still continued to grow as I tried to mend myself with what I thought was a self-help program. So in 2008, life was unbearable. I was gaining weight. I was telling lies. I was now married. I love the foreword to the second edition in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, because it actually says of the people who came to Alcoholics Anonymous, 50% got better straight away. Another 25% came and went, but eventually got well. And then it says, and the others just felt a little bit better and had a better way of life. And I was that 25%, my first 15 years. I came along, I put in my big toe. I wasn't really a working part of the fellowship. And I felt a little bit better. But in 2008, the monster was growing and I couldn't cope anymore. Food had beaten me. Alcohol had beaten me. And painkillers. I knew I was at a really bad stage because red wine wasn't doing it. Add to that the chocolate cake and the great amounts of food I was eating, and that was not quelling the restlessness inside of me. And so I was on the painkillers and the antidepressants. Now, luckily for me, I had a GP, and she said to me, Pamela, you're going to have to go deeper. You're going to have to really sort out what's going on, because these antidepressants and these painkillers are not going to solve your problem. And I knew exactly where to come. And I contacted my sponsor. She's my sponsor today in 2008. And she knew that I'd been around a long time, dabbling with the self-help part of the program. There is no self-help part of the program unless you're deluded like me and you read the 12 steps in a strange way. And she said, are you willing to go to the extremes that is necessary? Are you willing to get sober from everything? And I was ready. I waved the white flag and I said, tell me what to do. How high do you want me to jump? And I have to say that in my experience, I've had to do that every day for the last 13 days. And what that meant for me was I needed help. I needed, will somebody please tell me what to eat and when to eat? Will somebody please tell me how to handle my marriage, my workplace, my neighbors, and my friendships? Will somebody please just help me to turn around my unmanageable life so that I can have what the people in Addictive Eaters Anonymous seem to have: peace of mind and fun, and to be slim, because at one stage I weighed well in excess of 350 pounds. And I knew that inside of that big fat oaf, and I say that lightheartedly these days, you know, I knew that inside was a beautiful child of the universe, child of God, that was desperate to live her life. And my sponsor and the people that come to the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous and Addictive Eaters Anonymous have continued to offer me love and support and sponsorship And I have found that I've no longer needed food, painkillers, antidepressants, and red wine to help me cope and to take the edge off life. And so my routine, I don't like that word. This has become a way of life for me. And each day is a day when I must begin it with God, with a concept of a power greater than myself. Every day I sit in this seat. This is my sacred spot here at home. And it was sacred before lockdown, and it's still sacred today. We've lived in this house for 3 years, and I chose this spot because it looks directly onto, there's 3 parks surrounding my home. It's a beautiful autumnal day. And whatever weather, I start the day in this chair with my big book and my prayers and a phone call to my sponsor and a lot of silence. And these days, you know, step 11 makes it clear, sort through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God. And I love prayer and meditation. But when I share, I will often say stillness and pausing and the feeling of God within, the feeling of freedom and joy within is what makes me free of the food, the drink, the drugs, and the painkillers. I start the day here and I'll read these days, excuse me. So in my first few years, maybe 2 to 5 years, I would read the 164 pages over and over again. These days, I continue to read the book, but I pick out favorite paragraphs, you know, step 10, step 11, step 12. I'll read them every day and I will pause. It says all of this. I didn't make this up myself. These things were shown to me by the people in the fellowship, you know, page 86, 87, and 88. It tells me how to live my life on awakening. But I do know that in order for me to go deeper in challenging times, I'm going to have to have done a thorough step 1 and a thorough step 4. Actually, I'm just trying to inspire any new members here, but all of the steps have to be done thoroughly. But I'm picking out those foundations that have enabled me in the last 20 months of this peculiar time in the world to have a joyousness and a freedom that is indescribable, based on completely admitting that I am powerless over food and drink and painkillers, sex, spending money. Everything for me, Justin, had to go. I am the type of personality that is overconfident, and I've always been financially secure. I've always had beautiful homes. I've never been wanting. I've had a good career and still continue to have that career. So I know that those aesthetics, house, home, husband, money, work, status, they don't work. They do not keep me sober. And I often, when I share with people who ask for my help, you know, I will mention, and because we're not in an official Addictive Eaters Anonymous meeting, you know, I say, look at the world's most famous stars, you know, fame and fortune, people who are beautiful singers, beautiful actors who have left the earth through drink and drug addiction. And we know of actors who have died because they've eaten themselves to death. So fame and fortune and going to public school is not my problem. And being molested as a child and having a mother who was hierarchical and believed that children were to be seen and not heard was not my problem either. I believe I was born with the illness. I believe it probably started with the first man and woman on earth. You know, the alcoholic mind and the thinking, the problems, the ruminating. I believe I was born that way, and my drug of choice came later. And in the last 20 months, I have continued to practice and taken out a lot of insurance policies in the steps. And I have continued to attend my meetings and, of course, help other alcoholics and addicts. It's the only way I know. And I've just copied my sponsor and the other long-time members. My own sponsor is 41 year sober. You know, she's a woman, nearly 80 years old. And other people in her life in the fellowship in AA and Addictive Eaters Anonymous, you know, they're 35 years sober, 30 years sober. And I just enjoy watching them and hearing them tell me how to get out of self and go and serve. And miracles have happened in my own life, you know, in that, I don't know. So real problems in the last few months. The roof started leaking. The car started rattling. The companies we were relying on for business dried up. And I just gave them all to God. And what that means for me is when my magic magnifying mind starts thinking about the fact that we contacted 10 roofers, 9 of which promised to come and give us a quote for the hole in the roof. Actually, it wasn't quite that bad. It was a pool of rainwater. And 9 of them came and didn't fulfill their promises. And, you know, every single telephone call, every single promise was followed by a little prayer that said, God, over to you. I play my part. I take the action. I make the phone call. I listen to the excuses. I try not to be sarcastic and lose my temper, but to say, well, thank you, Tony. Thank you, David. These are all made up names. Thank you for at least getting in touch and telling me you can't come. And sure enough, roofer number 10 did arrive. And sure enough, the car was fixed. And sure enough, all of those little problems have been solved beyond my wildest dreams. And all I've had to do was sit quietly each morning, offer my will and my life over to the care of God, say my favorite prayers from the big book, and do my favorite meditations, some of the world's greatest spiritual writers and authors, plenty of podcasts, sit still many times a day. My meditation and my prayer life happens many times a day. Sometimes in the mornings, it's 20 minutes. Sometimes it's just 10. But for me, just like my mobile phone, my cell phone, I have to continually, a day at a time, recharge, re-plug in to this power. And it's true for me today that I'm no longer £350. I am no longer spending money inappropriately. I no longer need to be down the local bar room with strangers drinking into my pity cup. I have a lot of compassion. I went to my AA meeting earlier today, and the long timer, the 45-year-old long timer, started the meeting saying how wonderful he enjoyed his alcoholic beverages. And he joked that if God's got anything better than this, he must have kept it for himself. It was so funny. And I have compassion for any still suffering addict who still thinks that they need that nectar. Because, life can be difficult and challenging in these moments. But the big book has a solution that works if I use it and practice it on a daily basis and carry the message to another alcoholic, addictive eater, such as this meeting, this forum, Justin. And I thank you for allowing me to do that today. Life is good. And a little road rage today, only a little. What I'm sharing with you is I'm not perfect. On the way here, back home, tell a lie, on the way to my meeting, a little old man in his little old car was driving just under the speed limit. And because I'm late, my magic mind said, for goodness sake, a bit more expletives than that. Will somebody get this person out of my way? And I caught it. I caught the thinking. I caught the fear. I caught the tiredness in me. I took my foot off the gas. I laughed out loud to my husband and to myself. And I said, this is insanity. It's fine to be late. So on the spot inventories, step 10, enable me to remain sober each day. So I'll stop there, Justin. I hope I've stopped on time. I could talk forever, but I won't. Thank you.
Beautiful. And thank you for sharing your experience today with that, catching yourself in road rage. That's a beautiful thing to be able to find that and catch that immediately. And like you said, I'm not perfect, and I usually don't catch it until after a few expletives or whatever come out. So thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate your whole share. A reminder to our live audience here before we move on to the next section, which is Q&A. In order to answer or to ask a question of Pamela, please type it in the Q&A link there at the bottom of your Zoom window. It looks like two speech bubbles over the top of each other, and I'll read those to Pamela. I've also written a few questions here that based on what you shared, Pamela, that I'm just dying to hear your take on. First of all, I want to thank you actually for sharing your sacred chair with us. What a beautiful thing. I also have a sacred place in my office at home that is where I have my prayers, my meditations each morning that just lifts me. Can you share with us a little bit, Pamela, about the importance of having a sacred place that's dedicated to that type of work?
Thank you, Justin. Well, let me first say, that the sacred place is within. It's my heart and my soul, and it belongs to God, and it's always sacred. But, my experience is that when I'm at home, I can get carried away with my cell phone. I can get carried away with the TV. I can get carried away with what my husband's doing. And so because I was so needing this thing, this sobriety, I created a space in my home where my big book is here on the footstool. My other, as Bill sees it, daily reflections, and my other Addictive Eaters Anonymous literature is around me. And so when I sit here, somehow my body just goes into a time to have a conscious contact with God moment.
Thank you so much. All right. You mentioned that when you came into the rooms initially in 1993, but in 2008, you were ready to, tell me how high to jump. I'll jump as high as you tell me to jump, ready to do whatever it takes. Are you willing to share like a specific experience where you needed to jump higher than you thought was possible and what you learned from that experience?
Thank you. Well, because I had been in the fellowship, in and around the fellowship for a good 15 years before surrendering, I thought I knew the program, Justin, because I had been attending meetings and I was a popular member and I did a lot of service. And remember, I said that I felt a little bit better than when I first came in 1993. So I really, you prayed the set aside prayer at the start of the meeting. I had to learn new ideas, a new way of comprehending the program. I had to have an open heart and open ears to be a newcomer, to listen intently to what my sponsor was offering me, old ideas, and my just had to go. And so I looked at the big book and the program with a fresh set of eyes and ears, as if I didn't know anything. Some of us here are professional people. And, I remember taking horse riding lessons, and the gentleman who gave me the lessons asked me if I'd had experience of riding a horse before. And when I said no, he said, "Oh, thank goodness for that, because the hardest people to teach are people who think they already know something." So for me, big book, be a newcomer all over again. Listen with empty ears.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I'm actually really excited about that. I've only been in program for about 8 years and sober for 6.5. And, sometimes I talk to people, and I've experienced this myself, where things get stale, in program, and it's just the same old, same old. But if I um, really am seeking to get out of that stale, to find the next good thing, somebody is introduced into my life who just says, "Hey, have you ever thought of this in the program?" And it just revolutionizes everything. How do you keep things fresh today in your program?
Um, my experience is that I cannot remain sober on yesterday's sobriety. Every day is a new day where I start the day in conscious contact with God through prayer and meditation. And I read a lot. I study, you could call it study, spiritual literature, where it continually reminds me this is a new day. Forget yesterday. Who are you going to help today? Who are you going to be today? I'm very fortunate because I work from home and I have a sponsor who's a retired lady, and I can contact her first thing in the morning. And I know she has a sponsor. So she continually reminds me, what are your plans for the day? Who are you going to help? And to continually pause so that I really speak from the heart, not from the head. It's a God job. It's a God job, I tell you.
Thank you so much, Pamela. You shared, and you just shared now, how much you read, that keeps things, keeps you going and learning. And you mentioned earlier in your share that, early on you would read the first 164 pages of the big book, over and over and over again. And now it's more of a, targeted reading. What are some other recovery related books that have really helped you, that have elevated your own recovery experience?
I love the 12 and 12, the 12 traditions and the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. I love As Bill Sees It, because our founder, co founder, Bill Wilson, He loved writing. He wrote many letters and literature through the Grapevine magazine and newspaper articles, and snippets of that are in our AA literature. I and yes, there are well-known authors outside, but even Bill Wilson and Dr. Bob accepted that the spiritual life is not enough. So to go away from Addictive Eaters Anonymous and Alcoholics Anonymous and try and be sober with only God and myself doesn't work either. I need ego deflation. I need other members. I need to share and talk about my experience one with each other. So yes, I am happy to share which other spiritual authors I read, but I'm not doing it in this forum. People can contact me and I'll let them know. Thank you.
Excellent. And in order to contact her, you can reach out to me and I can relay you to her so that we the email address that you can reach me at is RECO12pod, RECO12pod @gmail.com. And I can relay anything to her and actually contact or connect Pamela with you if that's what you would like to do. All right. I have another question here that just intrigues me. Pamela, you said you attended meetings. You went into the rooms initially in 1993, and you were actively involved. You used it as a self-help type program, but you were actively involved. You knew the program. Whether you applied it or not, the way it should be is a different thing. So sometimes it takes time. How do we express love and patience for those of us, maybe myself included, who are just dipping our toes in?
Oh, thank you. Well, people had love and patience with me for 15 years. And so I have to practice that. I have to give that away to other members who are where I was for the first 15 years. And heaven knows, Justin, I'm just giving you my experience. If you really want to know how well I am, then come and live with me for a week. Come and drive in my car. See me at work. Am I really what I say I am? Do I really practice these principles? Am I really joyous and free? So that's the first part. The second part is sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. Just like it says in the foreword to the second edition, some members come to the fellowship and feel better, and they ride on that I feel better. And there just came a time in my own life where I knew I wasn't sober. I probably wasn't gambling. I probably wasn't taking cocaine or weed, but I was eating uncontrollably. I was still sneaking away for a glass of red wine. I wasn't yet in the gutter. I knew I wasn't clean and sober. My mind was unmanageable. My head was racing. Anxiety levels were rising. Lies were becoming more and more prolific. I knew I wasn't sober. And thank goodness my sponsor and other ladies were here for me and gently encouraged me to, if you're ready, we can help you.
Thank you for sharing that. Sometimes I've experienced this. I've seen it. Maybe I've even done it. When somebody comes into a meeting and is obviously not working the program and isn't progressing, I lose patience. I just start judging them. And I thank you very much, Pamela, for reminding me there. But for the grace of God, go I. And maybe I am even there and don't even realize it. I know I've got a lot of waking up to do in some areas of my life. And I just need to have patience with others and with myself. All right. You mentioned earlier also in your share about, basically co-addictions, moving from one addiction to the next. in addictions being very similar, if not identical, in how it works. Can you share with us a little bit more about that, about the similarities of addictions, no matter what the substance or behavior turns out to be?
Thank you. For me, there's only one problem, and that's the problem of me. And sometimes I can call that self-centeredness, fear, resentment. And that of itself produces many manifestations of the illness. These are just symptoms. The drinking is a symptom, my addictive eating and obesity. And for those of us who are anorexic or bulimic, using money, gambling, drug addiction, they are just the scab that covers the pus. So for me, the addiction is the pus that needs to be squeezed out from under the scab. The scab is just the symptom of the illness. So it is a very subtle illness, and it's very cunning, so I can stop drinking in one area, but continue to have an unmanageable life and eat and have sex and casual relationships and spend money that is not mine to be spent. And I was just broken. I didn't want it anymore. And it's not a judgment. I just wanted to go to bed at night free of debt, free of food, free of fat, free of worry, free of resentments. These are just symptoms. I needed a program that was going to absolutely remove the cause of my problems and of the drinking and the eating.
So you just shared all of the free of these things. These are all exterior, somewhat visible things. Becoming free of those things, how do those things initially, how are they like bonds or weights upon us? And when you become free of those, how does that affect you internally as well as those around you?
I can look the world in the eye, no longer afraid. The program has promised me confidence and joy and fun. When I was heavily into the addiction, I was not free. I was worried. I was anxious. I was always dependent on what you thought of me. I was alone. I woke up, and the first second I woke up, I would remember my problems, and they would cause my spine to crush. Never mind the weight of my body, my thinking destroyed me. And I would think over and over again about what you said and what I was going to say, and how dare you? And hasn't the boss noticed what a great job I've done? And I hope she doesn't think she's going to get. My life was a constant rehearsal of this tape going around and around. Having completed a thorough step, all of the steps, but step 4 in particular, I saw that the illness was based in fear and resentment. And I saw that every one of my fears was me always dependent on you and everybody else. What were you thinking about me? I was so afraid. And I have found that when I completed step 6 and step 5, step 6, 7, 8, 9, already in step 4, the moment I wrote out in black and white what was wrong with me, the resentments, the fears, the harms I had done to other people, I believe I started to feel lighter. I started to think, wow, I see the pattern in my behavior. I see the pattern in my thoughts. I couldn't wait. I was so enthusiastic to share this stuff with my sponsor in step 5. And then, by the time I was making amends, I was skipping. I couldn't wait to speak to the girlfriends that I had harmed, the men that I had abused in my life. And the more people like you allow me to share on this level and deeper with other women one-on-one, about sexual abuse, about sexual inappropriate behavior, about the darkness and the depression, the more I share that stuff in step 12, the more I feel better. And it's not a selfish sharing. It's a sharing that says, I know how you feel. I did it myself. We can get better together in God's grace.
Thank you for sharing that, Pamela. That's beautiful, and it is helpful to me. And I think it's a good lead into this next question. I mean, here you sit with about 13 years sobriety. Am I remembering that correctly? Your sponsor has 41 years, if I remember that correctly. There's someone in your meeting with 45. You have friends in the 30-year sobriety area. Why is it so important to you to interact with people with more sobriety than yourself? And maybe also to them, maybe they've shared with you why it's important for them to interact with people with more sobriety than themselves. Share about that, if you will.
Yes, I want what they have. I need it. I would love to be here. Justin, I would love that when I'm 57, when I'm 77, 67, 87, I would love to be sitting here and in my face-to-face meetings, still happy, joyous, and free, still sharing with the newcomer and the still suffering alcoholic who might be a member of the fellowship, but they're still paralyzed by the bedevilments. I still need to be here to help those people. And in so doing, I get better and better, so that the last 20 months do not affect me, because I know that these things are handled by a power greater than myself. That I am too. Man is meant to live on the planet. We are going to have illnesses and cars that need fixing. We're going to have marriages that break. We're going to have relationships with people who are not so reliable. And I need to have a way of handling life on life's terms. And I need, at 2 a.m. in the morning when you can't sleep, or you're worrying about your parents' health or your partner's emotions, I need the 2 a.m. program that says, breathe, pray, meditate, trust God, take action, but trust God, share it with another. I would love to be as young looking and as fit as I am today at 85, 95, and 105. And that's what the program gives me.
Awesome. And I think that goes into my next question, which I think is my final question. A reminder to our audience. Oh, we just got one that came in from our live audience. I'm going to ask that one first. This is from Heba. Heba asks, what do you do when you feel that you don't have energy to do the program? Great question, Heba.
Eva or Eba? You die. You die. No, okay.
Heba.
Then begin where you are. So I traveled down to my hometown and I was exhausted. It was an 8-hour car journey. It had torrential rain. I arrived home and I was exhausted because I'm human. So I begin where I am. So where I begin where I am is I sit here in this chair, but let's say it was the kitchen, because I have a 3-story house. The kitchen's on the ground floor. Walk straight into the kitchen and breathe. And if that's all I can manage, that is meditation. That right there, the pause, thanking my higher power, a power of my understanding, Spirit of the universe, God, thanking God for the safe journey home, acknowledging I'm exhausted, but just thanking, just having a sip of water, just saying a familiar prayer. Begin where you are. So remember, I'm 13 years, by the grace of God, sober today. I would not expect someone who's on step one to perhaps be doing it the way I do it. But when I was at step one, I found my own way. There's no such thing as a bad prayer or a bad meditation. Only not doing it is not helpful. So do it, anything.
Thank you, Pamela. Love that. Love that answer. Love that question. Thank you for asking that, Heba. All right. Now you have shared in a way that it seems that you are, I don't know if you're an expert, but you seem to be at surrendering the outcome and finding peace in that, trusting that your higher power has things in control. How does surrendering the outcome and just saying, whatever happens, I'm going to find peace with, but still going and taking action and having peace, how are those related? How do you practice that?
So 20 months, we've all undergone the pandemic. Businesses have closed and have slowed down. My husband and I have been unable to work because we've been relying on other businesses to help. But it didn't stop me from making the phone calls, networking. It didn't stop me from having lists of things to do. It enabled me, the pandemic enabled me to pause, sit back, readjust. So I had a plan of action, a daily one, a weekly one, or a monthly one. I'm sounding like a real businesswoman here. These are just really simple, informal things that work for me, but they worked. And 20 months later, just this week, the very large company are interested in working with us. And all my husband and I did was get to meetings, sponsor, help other alcoholics, addicts, get to my face-to-face meetings where possible, do the shopping, brush my teeth, a daily, you can't do this. I cannot do this by myself. Sponsorship, hang around with the winners, see who has what you need, peace, serenity, action. Hang around with them, talk to them, ring them up, read the big book with each other. That's what I do with the people I sponsor, and my sponsor does with me. It doesn't take long, 10 minutes with each member. Action, and then every step of the way, God, over to you. I've done my bit. The result is with you. Many times a day. Read those pages, page 86, 87, 88. It tells me and you how to live every day.
Thank you, Pamela. Great advice, great insights. Before we close out, do you have any final words of wisdom that you'd like to share with us?
The only thing I'd like to remind everybody is this is my experience. I do not speak on behalf of Alcoholics Anonymous or Addictive Eaters Anonymous. I speak from my own experience, strength, and hope. So, find your own concept of God, get a good sponsor, and just jump right into this program. It really, really works if you work it.
Awesome. Thanks again, Pamela. That was a great RICO 12 weekly speaker meeting for all addicts and those wanting to learn more about addiction and the recovery therefrom. And before I move on, I want to thank you again, Pamela, for being willing to work with my crazy schedule today, having to rearrange the time, the regular start time. To those of you who came in maybe a little bit later than we started, I apologize, but thank you for being here. It's been a great meeting. Now, if we didn't get to any questions that you may have, please go to rico12.com/forum and join in our community and ask those questions and answer others' questions that may come up. I invite the audience to come back next week. We'll be back at our regular rotation time, noon Central Time. And come join in with us. We'll have a great speaker next week, which I'm on the road and I didn't look at my calendar before this, so I can't remember who it is, but we have a great speaker next week. I'm sure of it. Okay, so before we close out here, Pamela has offered to send us off into our day with the 7th step prayer.
Thank you, everyone, for listening, for participating. Let's just have a moment of silence and I'll end with the step 7 prayer. My Creator, I am now willing for you to have all of me, good and bad. I pray that you remove from me every single defect of character that stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. Grant me strength as I go from here to do your bidding. Amen.
Amen. Keep coming back, everybody. It works when I work it, so work it. You are worth it.
Standing still a moment, carving out this time, reflecting on the landscape of this life of mine. Peaks too high to conquer, streams too wide to cross, troughs too deep to walk through without incurring loss. Yet here I am, still standing tall, despite the rough terrain. One like me survived the storms and walked through wind and rain. Still standing, I will fight the good fight, still searching